Welcome to Common Ground with SMK Medical, the podcast that aims to provide a platform for all open and informative discussions on common issues within the healthcare industry. Today, a special guest is joining us, Dr. Lord, the president of the International Caregivers Association. Dr. Lord is a true pioneer in the field of dementia care, and her leadership has been instrumental in revolutionizing the way we approach caregiving for persons living with dementia. See, Dr. Lord's journey as a leader began out of necessity. She's going to share that with us today. She recognized the lack of accurate and comprehensive information for caregivers. She founded the International Caregivers Association decades ago. Driven by her passion and commitment to improving the lives of those affected by dementia, she created this groundbreaking Care Provider Partnership Agreement program. This program has become a beacon of hope, providing invaluable support and care for persons living with dementia and long-term care settings. During our conversations with Dr. Lord, we would dive into the reality of poor dementia care today and the urgent need to change its course. She will share her insights, experiences, and expertise, shedding light on caregivers' challenges and the transformative solutions that can make a profound impact. As healthcare professionals, it's crucial for us, me included, to stay ahead of the curve. As healthcare professionals, it is crucial for us to stay ahead of the curve. Dr. Lord's wealth of knowledge and expertise in dementia care will undoubtedly provide invaluable insights that you can apply to your work in the healthcare industry. Welcome again to Common Ground with SMK Medical, where together we can shape a better future for our healthcare. Welcome, Dr. Lord. How are you doing today?
Well, thank you. I'm doing well.
Yes, thank you for coming on Common Ground with SMK Medical. I know I did an introduction on who you are, but I butchered it, right? So tell us who you really are.
Well, you did a very good job, actually. You did a very good job. I started a long time ago in private practice as a mental health counselor. And as a mental health counselor at that time, my husband got sick, and I found out he had vascular dementia. He was sick for 21 years, and I took care of him for those years. And so in the course of those years, of course, I changed career because I really wanted to know as much as possible about dementia to help him, first of all. But as you said, I realized there was no information available, and the information available was very limited. Some of it was erroneous. And so I decided to do my own research. I wrote several books. As a matter of fact, one of my most valuable book is a small pamphlet that I give away. If I have to mail it, of course I have to charge handling. But it's called How in the World and Now What Do I Do? Because that's exactly what I was asking. How in the world did he get dementia? And now what do I do to help him? And that's how it all started.
Wow.
And so I formed the International Caregivers Association to help other people. It was first called Remembering for You, because that's what I had to do for my husband. And I said, many people have to do that. I just realized that's what we had to do, live two people in one life. Yeah.
Wow. That's interesting, right? Because you started an organization based, as you stated, out of necessity, right? Your husband had vascular dementia. And can you describe what vascular dementia is, what dementia is, right? You know, you specialize in this area, but when people think of dementia, they automatically think of Alzheimer's, right? They only know Alzheimer's, right? We have that big association. But what is vascular dementia? What is dementia? And is there a difference?
There's really no difference. It's just one form, one classification. When you say Alzheimer's dementia, but person has Alzheimer's, that's because doctors that cannot specify if it's vascular, frontal lobe, or some other type, then they say it's Alzheimer's. It's all dementia. So in the end, it's the same thing. The person maybe is not even able to speak, and certainly does not remember very much. And we have the same type of care for all of them. There's so many classifications of dementia. Alzheimer's is the biggest one because that's the one that nobody knows what to do with, so they put them in there. Okay, so vascular dementia is probably the second one. Has to do with the heart. Usually people that have a lot of cholesterol or high weight and blood pressure problems end up with vascular dementia. That can be the case. It wasn't the case of my husband.
Very interesting. Very interesting. And it's I know as a nurse, some education about dementia, but in nursing school, right? It may be a chapter. It's so small, and I know as a healthcare provider, when I go into a patient's room, I have experience now, so I understand how to handle dementia and Alzheimer's. But when I first got into the long-term care arena, I wasn't as familiar, so I can only imagine what it was like for you to have a husband who's diagnosed with dementia and then have to relearn, like you said, a second person. So can you talk to us a little bit about kind of that relearning piece of a second person and what it was like when you found out he had dementia?
Well, when I found out that he had dementia, the first thing I asked is to have his driver's license removed because I knew that he was having problems driving. And of course, that was one of the biggest losses that he had in his life. He had driven all his life. So I said to him, he was crying on the way back from the doctor's office, and I said, "We'll adjust everything. We'll find out what to do, and I'll help you." And so when I say the second person is because I had to remember all his appointments, my appointments, what to do. And the first thing in the morning, he would say to me, "What are we doing today?" And so it's a lot of pressure on you, on the person, that the spouse or the partner, because all of a sudden you do have to remember for the other person. And that was something I had to adjust to. And, know what his favorite activities were ahead of time so that I could set up things for him to do. One of the things that I found the most useful was the doll therapy because he liked babies. And I used doll therapy to get at least an hour of respite myself because he could rock that baby and sing or take care of the baby. So you just adapt to the condition, and it is really individualized. And that's why when they get into long-term care, because eventually we get the fatigue timeline of caregivers, and you have to pay attention to that. Otherwise, 20% of caregivers will die before the person they take care of. And so it's really important to pay attention to it. And so when he went into long-term care, I saw that they didn't have the same training and preparation I had, and it was really difficult. So I stayed with him a lot. I paid a lot of attention, trained the administrators, the nurses, the doctors on how to deal with dementia because they had no idea. That's how it went.
You said an interesting statistics, doctor, and I found that interesting. You said 20%, roughly about 20% of people will die before the actual person they're caring for. That's very interesting because a lot of times when we talk about Alzheimer's, dementia, and just health in general, we forget the caregivers who has now sometimes dedicated their life to that loved one, right? You said you were a practicing therapist. You changed course in your life. I'm sure this was never on your path to kind of start to care for your husband. So, how did you manage your mental health and keep you in check so you can provide that stellar care to your husband?
Yes. Well, I'm fortunate because I had that background and educational background. There is no, not only in dementia care that the person may die before the person who, and that caregiver partnership or fatigue timeline applies. It applies to nurses in hospitals even. So it's just any time that you provide care for people, you have to pay attention to that. And once your appetite starts to go down, you don't sleep so well, you get depressed, you wonder if you're going to live through this, if you're going to survive it. You have to pay attention to that. The timeline is no more than 5 years. That's the maximum if you have a 24/7 responsibility like I had. And so after that time, after about 5 years, I had to place my husband. I needed a bigger team of people to help me. And so that's the reason he went into long-term care.
And I'm sure making that decision was hard, and many families struggle with that, right? I've been a home care nurse, and I would go in, and I'd have to talk to families and say maybe we can offer additional care in a long term care setting or a respite. I talked to family about respite. What was that like for you, and what experience? So I'll go with, what was that like for you when you made that decision to place him into a facility, right? Because for many years, I'm sure he's known your home, and like you said, for 5 years you were caring for him. What was that the turning point, like you said, where you was like, okay, I need to provide him another place to live while he goes through this disease process?
Well, fortunately, I have a large family. I have sisters and brothers. And my older sister, I have to thank her for that because she did come up with the idea maybe this is time to place him. I had also planned it way ahead. Just like anybody, even now, if you are married and nobody is sick in your family, you should really plan ahead for long term
Yes.
care. I had planned ahead exactly where he needed to go because his doctors were there. And let me tell you, for him, the house may have looked familiar, but it doesn't stay familiar. Do you
Yeah.
understand? The minute he left, it was no longer familiar. I remember bringing him back at one point because he was begging to go back home. And we got here, and he says, we better leave soon because these people are going to come back. Looking at the pictures on the wall, pictures of himself and the family, and he would say, these people are going to come back. And so it reassured me that he was in the right place.
Yes.
It no longer mattered to him. So that's another thing that we have to adjust as we move along as caregivers, that things will change for them, and so we have to change with them alongside to keep up with that. Yes.
Wow. It's interesting, right? As a nurse, I've um, taken care of patients with dementia. And like you said, sometimes they go home for home visits. And I've heard that as well, that they go home and they don't recognize that that's their home. And I'm sure as a caregiver, that's heartbreaking for you. Now that you've transitioned him into a long-term care setting, you talk about and you talk about that you educated the administrator, the doctor, and the care team about dementia. What was that like? What was the turning point where you realized that, hey, maybe they don't know everything about dementia, and I can possibly give them some additional tools to care for my husband, and while they're caring for my husband, it's going to benefit the other residents of this facility as well.
Well, it was easy to realize that because, first of all, hardly anybody could speak Alzheimer's. And to speak Alzheimer's, it's only three very small steps, but it
Hmm.
needs practicing. So the first thing I asked them to do is to speak Alzheimer's with my husband. But then there were so many examples of crisis situations in the long-term care that came up, and they didn't know what to do. They would back off. People were starving because they didn't want to eat. They were aggressive, showing some aggression, and they didn't know how to deal with that. Uh, Different things like that. So I just said, please move back and observe. I'll show you how to do this. So in the real life situations, I was really good at that. It
Yes.
didn't matter what was presented to me. I was able to deal with it. It helped them to understand that you don't have to be afraid of somebody with dementia.
Yes.
If you see some aggression, it's because they have a need that's unmet. What is
Yes.
that need? And
Yes.
so I would show them, I'll give you just one example. This man was wanting to see his brother, and he was really following me down the hall. And I brought him back to the nurse's station, and I said, "This man wants to see his brother." And the nurse had tears in her eyes, and she said, his brother has died. And I said, "What was the brother's name?" And she gave me the name, and the fellow was pounding on the counter. He wanted to see his brother, and I said, "Let me show you what you do." I started pounding at the same speed as he was pounding next to him. And I said, "You want to see your brother?" And I named him. And I said, "Your brother loves you very much, and you love him too, don't you?" And as soon as I said that, he stopped the pounding. Everything calmed down. So I showed them that if you can meet that need that's unmet, you can resolve that situation. There's no need for it. But they were really not trained in that. Hardly any situation I've seen, and I've seen many, nurses, doctors, and administrators were not trained. And that's why I created this Care Provider Partnership Agreement program to augment that knowledge and to reinforce a program that really assures that everybody's successful within uh, that form of treatment, that long-term care. How do we protect not only the residents, but how do we protect the staff so they can do better and the company can do better and everybody is relaxed and you don't have the burnout that we have now? It needs to change.
Yeah, I think as you talk about caregiver burnout is very, very real, and it can be, from an actual caregiver loved one or a healthcare provider who's caring for someone, repetitively. So I think any type of training is good. You develop a training program that you have launched all across the U.S. Talk to me about that training program and what makes your training program kind of stand out for patients or residents with dementia.
Well, first of all, there needs to be at the hub of that organization somebody that's knowledgeable, as I was in dementia. So they could come to me and ask me any situation or present any situation, and I was able to deal with it. At the moment, nobody is in that spot, in that hub. I call that a health or dementia coach that needs to be trained as a coach first. It's usually a 2-year program, and then also in dementia care. Everything about dementia, as I trained myself, and I was trained by others. The other thing is in my program is that those caregivers, family caregivers like myself, that's not only knowledgeable but really wants to stay to the end of life with their loved one, that they're allowed to be trained as a care partner. And in that system, in that program, you would have maybe 10, 12 family caregivers that would remain on a daily basis, would come in and be another set of eyes, be another hand to help out with the other staff, with the workforce. And so I separated that in 3 groups. So the administration would have a special training. And then, of course, the nurses with direct care and the CNAs would have a special training with testing on a regular basis to make sure they stay up with the knowledge and information that they need to do their job well. And then the last one is anybody in the kitchen staff, anybody in the janitor, anybody else that works in that organization is trained but not tested. They don't have to be tested, just like administrators. Administration would not have to be tested. And each training spot would be, or training program would be a different timing for each group. So, we know that organizations have a hard time recruiting right now. Same with hospitals, but especially in long-term care and assisted living, they have hard time with recruiting. That would solve that problem, because people that feel supported, that work in that system, would not want to leave because they feel supported. They know they can come to a person like me and get an answer if they have trouble by what happened. Maybe they were called names while they were serving one of the residents, and they felt offended by that, and it depressed them. That happens all the time. They would have somebody to go to. The retention and the burnout is a big problem, and it costs thousands and thousands of dollars per person that burns out. That would be out. They wouldn't have that anymore. And so they wouldn't have also a revenue problem or a survey problem, because all the surveys I looked at, that's one of the things they reported. The services could be better. And so this program would assure the best possible services to that organization and to the families. The families would all of a sudden feel confident that they can leave their loved one there and somebody's looking after them. Even the family could come to a person like myself and say, I don't know what to do. My husband or my wife is near death. What do I do? And that person could be handled as well. Their questions listened to, and walk out feeling good. So the reputation of the organizations would go up publicly, right? So you would want to place your mother or father there, or your loved one, because there's somebody there at the hub of that system that understands your loved one. Without knowing them, they understand them.
Wow. So I bet that's a great program for facilities who have a dementia program, or as
Memory loss.
memory
Any
loss.
memory. Mm-hmm.
Yes, secure unit, whatever the facility calls it, right? I'm sure that's a great program. When I think about, some of the struggles that long-term care has when it relates to memory loss or secure unit, it's kind of that training and education piece, right? And kind of exactly what you're trying to tackle. I know of my experience it's sometimes challenging to keep the same consistent staff on a unit, for various reasons, right? Staff turnover, staff call in, whatever the reason, staff promotions, whatever the reason. So I think having some system where we can support our team better is key.
Mhm.
Because as I stated, right, as a nurse, there's limited training, and I was a CNA before I was a nurse, and it might have been a page or two in your book. So the focus is not there. When we talk about holistic care, I think we need to start really including dementia as a form of holistic care, right? Because who you are today is not who you're going to be tomorrow. And as you said, the disease can rapidly progress. So we need to be able to care for that person at all stages of life, no matter what the disease process is. So I think your program and in any program that's supporting that is vital to resident outcomes, improving resident outcomes. I wanted to ask, what are your thoughts? I saw some yesterday kind of flicker on my timeline. There's been an approval of a new Alzheimer's drug or a new dementia drug. I don't know if you're current on that process or not, but do you have any thoughts on that?
I'm current on everything to do with dementia and memory loss. By the way, I want to add that about 80 to 85% of all residents
Yes.
in assisted living and long-term care have a form of memory loss.
Wow.
And so we're really on this. This is very serious. We need to change
Yes.
the course of dementia care because we're loaded with it. All right. So the new drug that you're talking about is not safe. I would never recommend any drug at the moment. My husband went from everything that was prescribed to him, which was about 12 medications at the beginning, including beta blockers, high blood pressure medication, anxiety medication. I removed him from all those medications and included only natural supplements. Even for blood pressure, I had a blood pressure tonic. Everything worked. And I was grateful for that because one time the nurse made an error and gave him a shot of for diabetic resident who had a red shirt. My husband had a red shirt, and she gave it to my husband instead of the other patient. And it was the highest dose possible, and he had absolutely no reaction because he took no medications. He took only supplements. So no, there's no safe drug right now. There's many safe supplements that you can add. The other thing that I need to add is when he went to the doctor to start, when you asked me the very first question, he went to the doctor. Doctors don't realize when they give a diagnosis of Alzheimer's or dementia that they're giving two diagnoses because the family caregiver is now diagnosed to be having to help that person, and their life is changing as well as the person that just heard they had Alzheimer's or dementia.
Definitely. I think of when we think about certain diagnoses that impact families, I always think about the big one, right? Like a cancer diagnosis, right? Because the patient not only gets, but the family. But when you talk about something such as dementia, probably ACLS, something along those lines, right? Myasthenia gravis. Yeah, we got to think about the families as well, and realize that once again it goes back into that caregiver role strain, and now probably some level of anxiety is probably going to change some financial outcomes for the family. The way that they once lived may not be the way that they're going to live going forward. So it's going to impact not only that resident, that patient, but the family, the son and daughter, the uncle, brother, sister, grandma, whoever has to now take care of this family member. So I thank you for pointing that out. I wanted to switch gears now to a little bit more about your organization. I was able to find this information on the screen, and this is your Caregiver Provider Partnership Agreement Program. Can you talk to me a little bit more about that? I know you talked a little earlier about it, but is there anything else that you'd like to add to this?
Well, like I said, it's the thing of the past, the way we did business in the past, it can no longer continue because it's failing us. And so I list on my website there the benefits. That website that you're showing the benefits for both the facility or the business and the actual management of the business, which is the administrator, and the workforce, the ones who actually do all the work for these residents, or what they call the customers sometimes, and also for the families. So my program is affecting all aspects, including families, which is really important. And you have just now, let's work together. They can always get in touch with me and tell me what their organizations need. I'd be happy to go and visit and do a survey of what their problems may be and how this program would correct it. Now, this is not only for the United States. I have some interest in the UK right now. It's all over the world. That because dementia and memory loss is so common.
Yes.
We have our veterans that are in the service and they get hurt and they suffer with memory loss. Even the Veterans Administration need to look at this program and say, no, can we help our veterans better? My husband happened to be a veteran, so I'm very serious about that. The veterans just visited another facility in Omaha recently. I saw the same problems as I saw through Maine with my husband. So those organizations need to pay attention to how can we do better? Can we continue? Can you really continue doing business the way that business is done today? It cannot. And so I think that this program is one of the few solutions I have seen that can improve the system and improve the delivery of services to people with memory loss.
Wow. Dr. Lord, I thank you for your time, for you to take time out of your day to come on Common Ground with SMK Medical to share your insights on dementia. If someone wants to get in contact with you, how would they reach out to you?
They reach out to me either through email, Lord Etel, ETHELLE at gmail.com. They can also call my office. I have two offices, one in California and one in Maine. And they can call my office in Maine at 207-764-1214. They can call California. I will answer there as well. It's 760-660-4460.
Powerful. I appreciate you taking time out of your day and once again just enlighten us with the knowledge that you've gained over the years for patients, members, residents suffering from dementia care or memory loss, right? I think it's important that we as caregivers, we as providers have a solid understanding of that disease process so we can properly provide exceptional care to those patients. We want them to live as long as they can and to live with dignity, right? Because you gain a diagnosis of dementia or Alzheimer's doesn't mean you lose your dignity. And what I love to say, it doesn't mean you lose your rights. I think that's a key thing that I share as an administrator is, no one loses their rights when they lose their ability to say right or wrong. You don't lose your rights. We still have to treat you with dignity and respect.
Exactly.
Thank you for joining us on Common Ground with SMK Medical. We hope that our discussion with Dr. Lord provided valuable insights into the industry's pressing issues. Common Ground with SMK Medical will continue to strive to create a safe space for meaningful conversations in healthcare, and we look forward to bringing you more informative and engaging episodes. Common Ground with SMK Medical wants you to stay informed, stay engaged, and stay tuned. If you've enjoyed this episode, hit that like button and subscribe button and follow us on our social media pages. You can follow us on YouTube and LinkedIn at SMK Medical, and you can follow me on TikTok and Instagram at Your Healthcare Consultant. Thank you for joining us.